it's Emily, and oh my god, I did it. I actually read even more than I thought I would be able to get through for the NEWTs in August. Don't know how that happened, but it happened. So I'm going to quickly go through all of the things that I read. I'm not going to be able to get too in depth on these because there's a lot to get through. So let's just get into the books. So I'm going to go class by class, and as a reminder, I was going for ministry worker with a focus on environmental regulation, because that's kind of my actual job. And so I just thought it would be fun. I'll be sure to link my TBR video below. So I think I'm going to go kind of in the same order as my TBR video, just to kind of keep things organized. So let's start with charms. The first, or the acceptable prompt for charms, was to have a book that had a beautiful cover. And for that one I did Cruel Crown by Victoria Aveyard. So this is a couple of novellas in her fantasy world, or set in her fantasy world. And I actually really enjoyed these. So it was two completely different side stories, but I actually was very interested in both characters and kind of both time periods that they were talking about. In these novellas, I can't go too in depth into what the novellas are about because I think they're kind of spoilery. They're definitely, you definitely need to read Red Queen first before these make sense. But these were a lot of fun, and it kind of drew me back into the world, and kind of really made me want to go back and pick up Broken Throne, which I picked up a little bit earlier this year and was published a little bit earlier this year. And I didn't realize until I picked up Broken Throne recently that the first two novellas in that are actually these two novellas. And then she added some more bonus content and wrote two more novellas to kind of put Broken Throne together. So I'm actually a good chunk of the way through Broken Throne now because I've read the first two novellas. If you're a fan of the series, I think you'll really enjoy these. The next prompt, the Exceeds Expectation prompt for charms, was to read a graphic novel or comic, and so I did The Misadventures of Grumpy Cat and Pokey, and there's not really a ton to say about this. It's about a grumpy cat and his friend Pokey, and they go on adventures, and it was fun, it was cute, it was what I wanted to get out of this. I've got a couple of more that I'm excited to get to, but yeah, there's really not a ton to say about this one. So next is Defense Against the Dark Arts, and the acceptable prompt for that one was to read a hardcover with Black Under the Dust Jacket, and so I picked Gendered Adam. And this one is a nonfiction book that kind of discusses the intersection of science and gender, and whether or not scientists and science as a process can be objective because it is undergone by not objective, like flawed people, and questions whether or not gender dynamics can play a role in what kinds of questions are asked by scientists, how they interpret the results, and ultimately whether or not science as an enterprise can be an objective one. And it was really fascinating. There was, and he kind of goes through and uses Mary Shelley's Frankenstein as kind of a lens for this discussion, which wasn't really something I anticipated, but was really interesting. This is a very philosophy-heavy book, and so I'm a scientist to the core. I was a biochem major in undergrad. I have a master's in environmental science, and so I am a very practical scientist in terms of my personality. Like, I want to know the practical implications of something. I want to, so for something like this, I wanted practical examples and real world examples that were very crystal clear to highlight what he's talking about. And I've definitely read, I took a philosophy of science class in undergrad that I absolutely loved. I thought it was fascinating, which is kind of what drew me to this book. And so I know that there are a lot of examples out there, and I kind of wanted that to be a little bit more present in this book, at least for my personal taste. So I don't always gravitate towards philosophy books because I personally find that they don't always seem very grounded to me, and I can't always draw lessons in some of these philosophy books that can be, at least to me, tell me something about the world and how to make it better. And so I always like there to be a lot of really cool concrete examples that you can use to kind of, in the future, as scientists are doing research, you can kind of keep these examples in mind as research is moving forward and begin to think more critically about that research. But this was a really interesting book, and so I'd probably give it a 3.5 out of 5. It's kind of hard to rate nonfiction like this, but it was really interesting. So the exceeds expectation prompt for this one was to just stop, think of a book on your TBR, whatever first comes to mind, and write that down. And that for me was The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I absolutely love this. I really felt like I would from everything that I had heard about it. It's a character-driven story about people on a ship, and they have just received a job or they've been given a job to build tunnels through space and connect different places in space. So that's kind of the function of their ship. And Rosemary has just joined the Wayfarer, that's the ship's name. And so she kind of joins this group of people, and it's a very just small, unassuming ship. Building tunnels is kind of looked at as one of the lesser things that you can do as a space crew or as a crew on a ship, the function of the ship. And so Rosemary is kind of looking to get away from her past, and she joins the Wayfarer and kind of integrates herself into this really awesome team of various species that are on the ship and make up this crew. And so it's about their relationships, it's about the things they go through as they're getting to this job site, and kind of the things that happen on the way there, and them going through this tunneling job and completing that, and kind of the implications of the things that they discover along the way and the things that happen to them along the way. As I said, it's definitely a character-driven story, so it's not huge twist turns and plot-driven story. Like, it's not a very fast-moving story at all, but the characters are so well developed and they're so fascinating. You get to explore so many different species and how all these different species interact, and it's just fascinating. It's just so fascinating. I was hooked from page one. I actually listened to this on audio for the most part, and the narrator is fantastic. Kizzy is my life, and I want her to be my best friend. Anyway, 5 out of 5. Seriously, I love this. I'm so excited to read the other two in this series. I don't think the other two in this series follow this crew in particular. I think it kind of takes place in different areas of this world, is my understanding, but I'm so excited just to continue exploring this world, and I loved her writing so much. So I actually also completed the outstanding prompt for Defense Against the Dark Arts, and that was to read a book either set in, I think it was either the UK or England, or maybe Britain. I'm not sure which of those it was actually supposed to be set in, but either the author needs to be from that area or it needs to be set in that area. I think it might have been England. So I was very pleasantly surprised to find out that Ruth Ware is actually an English author. And so when I saw Turn of the Key on Scribd, I had heard about Turn of the Key from Books and Lala, and so I was super excited to check it out, and figured, why not? It's on Scribd, I can get the audiobook, so I decided to listen to the audiobook of Turn of the Key. Oh, it was good. It was good. I had so much fun listening to this one. It's about a woman named Rowan, and she accepts a nannying position, it's a live-in nannying position for a well-off family who both of the parents travel a lot and for extended periods of time, and so they want a live-in nanny to look over their 4 girls, and they kind of range in age. There's a teenager all the way down to toddlers, and so good mix of ages in that range. And so Rowan accepts this position and travels to I think it's actually takes place in I think it's in Scotland. It's like this remote place in Scotland, and so she arrives there, she meets the kids, and is interviewing for the position. She accepts, and ultimately moves into the house to watch over the kids, and weird things start happening. So this house that she's staying in is kind of this tech smart house, and so she's trying to figure out the technology in this house and how it works, as well as getting used to the kids and how to take care of them. So as she's learning about the kids and learning about the house, just weird things start happening. The kids are kind of acting in peculiar ways. The technology starts doing weird things. Like, things just don't seem to be what they appeared at first. So this isn't a spoiler, this is actually how the story opens. The story is told in the format of a letter to someone that she wants to represent her, a lawyer that she wants to represent her, because she is in jail being accused of murdering one of these kids. And so that's how the story opens. And then you go back through, you know, her being interviewed for and accepting a position and the weird things that are going on in this house. And, you know, all the way up until, you know, this kid dies and what's going on. And it was fascinating. I was hooked. I was hooked with this book, and I could not stop listening to it. So as far as the story, I probably do like 4.5-ish probably. I felt like, so, and I'm not too familiar with thrillers. I don't read a ton of them, so I'm not sure if they tend to be this rushed at the end. But it did seem very, very, in terms of actually wrapping everything up and having everything make sense, was very much just right at the end. And I kind of wanted that to be spread out a little bit so that you could kind of fill in some of the pieces, answer some more of the questions, and kind of wrap things up more completely than what I felt happened. But it was so good. The acceptable prompt for potions was to read one of your friend's favorite books, and for that I chose Cersei. I've just heard a lot about it on BookTube, and it's definitely some people's favorites, or very close to some of their favorites, and so I just counted it because I wanted to read this for a feminist book club that I'm a part of. This was their book for the month of August, so I wanted to integrate it into the TBR somehow. So this follows the Greek goddess Cersei, and it's her backstory. This is by Madeline Miller, and I really enjoyed this. It actually took me a little bit to kind of get into it, and I think there was just a little bit something about the writing style that made me feel a little bit removed from what's going on. So it took me a little bit to get into this, but once I did, I was really into it, and I was really into her life and what was going on, and her interactions with the other gods and, you know, other mortals that came into her life. And she, so basically what happens is that she finds out she has more power than she thought, and she's vanished to an island, and so it's about her life on this island and how she interacts with the gods while being banished to this island. Anyway, that's really all I want to say about the plot, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really did enjoy the writing style once I kind of got used to it, and it still was just something, as I said, that made me feel a little bit removed from what was going on, but it still was a really gorgeous writing style, and I think she just painted a really vivid, nice picture of Cersei and her life and her, just why she did the things that she did. She's certainly not a perfect character by any means, but she's been through so much, and it was just fascinating. I don't read a lot of like god, you know, like Greek god myth stories, so it was really cool to kind of delve into that world a little bit. But yeah, I definitely see why this is a favorite of so many people, and I'd probably give it a 4.5 overall. Really, really loved it. So the exceeds expectation prompt for potions is to read a book with your house color on the cover. So I chose Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. I am a Ravenclaw to the core, so I figured this would be a good one because it is just very blue on the cover. It was also pretty short. And this follows Nadia and Said, and they are kind of in a war-torn area. Things are getting more and more violent by the day, and there are these doors that can take you to another place. And so fundamentally this book, that's the kind of magical realist element, but otherwise it's a relatively contemporary feeling story. It's really just about these two people and their relationship, about them meeting and falling in love as things are kind of becoming worse and worse around them, and then they eventually are able to go through one of these doors, and it's about their struggle to find a place to call home. Like, this book is fundamentally about immigration and migration and why people move to other places, and you know what that costs them, but why they still do it anyway, despite, you know, leaving some of their family in some cases, or despite the hardships and trying to settle into a new place. And so they actually end up going to several different places, you know, in their quest to kind of not just find a safe place and a place that they can at least have some semblance of normalcy, but it also follows their relationship and how their relationship becomes a bit strained as they're moving from place to place, and they're trying to keep that relationship together and just figure out how to survive in their world. And this was beautifully written. I also really enjoyed the audiobook. It's actually narrated by the author, and I listened to it while reading it physically, and that was a really fun way to go for this one. But this was a beautiful story. It was gut-wrenching. I felt everything that Nadia and Said were doing, and they're definitely flawed characters, but you also really understand why they made the decisions they did, how they were feeling, and what they sacrificed, and how hard they fought to maintain a close relationship despite everything changing around them all the time. And it was just beautiful and so relevant. I really would recommend picking this up. Like, this is probably a 5-star read for me. I mean, it was so raw, and I was just so emotional after reading this. Like, I definitely had a book hangover after reading this, which is usually something I use to kind of distinguish a 5-star from maybe a 4.5 or, you know, another rating. So good. So Nexus Transfiguration, the acceptable prompt for Transfiguration was to read a book with LGBTQIA plus representation. And so I actually read a graphic novel, Paper Girls Volume 1, and it's set in the 80s, and it follows some paper girls. So there's a new paper girl in town. She kind of joins this group of paper girls, and something happens as they discover a weird piece of futuristic technology, and so they're transported into this alternate reality, or what seems to them to be an alternate reality, and just follows them trying to figure out what's going on. So trigger warnings in this one for suicide. I hadn't realized that before starting, so I just thought I would mention that. But this was really cool. I really liked the art style. I really liked some of the characters. And my brother actually has most of the rest of this series, so he actually is letting me borrow the rest of this series. I think up until the last one. I think I need to find the last one, but he's letting me borrow the rest of them to continue on with the series. So I'm really excited to kind of see where this goes and who these other people are in this alternate reality and how they relate to these women, and whether or not they will be able to make their way back home. I, as I said, love the art style. I love the snarky dialogue. So I feel like this is a 4.5, and definitely excited to see where this goes. So the exceeds expectation prompt for Transfiguration is to read something that is not the first in the series, and I read Banshee Home, and this is the second book in the Banshee series. I read Banshee last month. So I read Banshee in July and really loved it. So it follows our main character, Banshee, and she is from a group that doesn't really leave their home ever, and she gets accepted into this off-world university to study math, and so she kind of leaves without telling anyone, and is going to this university, and it's about something that happens on the transport ride there. This one follows her as she's coming home from her first year of university, and so I can't really say too much about the plot of this one because I don't want to spoil anything, but I really love this continuation. It's just such a unique, like, I've never read anything like this. I love the way that it kind of draws on the traditions of her group of people, but also is very futuristic at the same time. That is kind of juxtaposed to her other identity as someone who goes to an off-world university. It's just a fascinating mix. This book is fundamentally about her finding her identity and coming to terms with that. and trying to really figure out who she is and who she wants to be, you know, in the midst of all of the kind of groups of people that she's a part of. And so, fascinating series. This is by Nnedi Okorafor, and I absolutely would recommend. Probably 4.5. Like, seriously, so cool. And I'm reading the third one right now, actually, and also really enjoying that. So, yes, would recommend. On to Care of Magical Creatures. I needed to go all the way to Outstanding for Care of Magical Creatures. And so the first prompt is to read a book that starts with the letter A to kind of remember Aragog. And so I listened on audio to Americanah by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I absolutely loved this. It's about a woman named Ifemelu, and she is from Nigeria and spends a lot of time in the United States, and it's about her childhood. She, you know, kind of falls in love with this guy named Obenzi, and ultimately, there's a lot going on in Nigeria, and so they're trying to figure out, so their families are trying to figure out those political situations, and these two kind of get caught up in that, and Ifemelu ultimately ends up in the United States, Obenzi ends up in the UK, and it's about their lives as they kind of grow apart and try to adjust to their new societies. It's about immigration, it's about the struggles of trying to fit into a new, completely different culture than what you've ever known, and how difficult that is, and her struggles, but also her triumphs. So, in the United States, Ifemelu has become a well-known blogger about race issues in America. So that actually tied in some really cool elements, because interspersed throughout the book are blog posts that offer just really, really interesting and insightful commentary. And it was so well written. It was fascinating. I loved the characters, and it just felt so real, and it was just so raw. Really, really made you think a lot about a lot of different issues, from her being a woman and gender issues to race issues to matters of identity to family and relationships. There trigger warning in this one as well for a suicide attempt, so keep that in mind as well. But I absolutely love this. It also was a little bit nostalgic for me. I actually was able to pick this up. I traveled to Ghana for work earlier in the summer and picked this up while I was traveling there. Like, I spent a week there. It was absolutely incredible. And so there were also some things in here that reminded me of my trip and how amazing it was. So that was a lot of fun as well. Anyway, I just absolutely love this and would probably give it close to a 5 out of 5 stars. I didn't quite get the hangover that I do for some 5-star books, but I really do feel like this deserves 5 stars. So I'm probably going to keep it at 5 stars because it was just so good. Next prompt for Care of Magical Creatures was to read a book under 300 pages, and so I read one that was right at 300 pages, and that is Moana, the story of Moana. And this was just a delight. It's exactly what you think it is. It is the story of Moana. It was really cool too because it was interspersed with different tales from Moana's people throughout the story. And so it was really cool to read those myths and those legends, as well as get the full story of Moana that we all know and love. And Moana's just such a badass. I love her, and I loved reading this. So it's definitely geared towards kids. So the writing style is definitely geared towards children and for young kids to enjoy. But honestly, I still enjoyed it, and I'm 29, so yeah, I loved it. So the outstanding prompt for Care of Magical Creatures was to read a book with a bird on the cover. And I actually didn't end up reading any of the books that I thought I would read for this prompt. I actually ended up reading The Unnie Mooners by Christina Lauren. I actually listened to this on audio because I saw it on Scribd. And I was just really in the mood for a light, fun summer romance. And I'd heard about Christina Lauren's books, and I just thought I would enjoy this one. I just thought it would be a nice, fun thing to listen to, and so it was on Scribd, and there was a bird on the cover, so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to use this for my outstanding prompt for Care of Magical Creatures. So didn't bring down my physical TBR with this one, but it's fine. So this follows two sets of twins. One of the women and one of the men are getting married, and their sister and brother don't particularly like each other. They tolerate each other because, because their sister or brother are married. So, they tolerate each other, but they don't particularly like each other. And so as the wedding happens, everyone except these two people who don't particularly like each other get food poisoning. And so the two who are getting married basically tell their sister and brother, look, you should go on our honeymoon. Like, it's going to be a waste of money otherwise. And they decide to go, and they decide that they'll just go see each other as little as possible during this honeymoon, but otherwise just enjoy a trip to Maui because otherwise it's going to go to waste. And of course they end up falling in love, and other shenanigans is happening while they're on vacation, both in Hawaii and back at home. And it was fun. Like, I'm probably not going to think about it much. In fact, I remember Olive is the main woman in the story. I honestly don't even remember the guy's name. Like, it's not going to be a book that I think a lot about in the future. It was just a cute one that I listened to. It served its purpose. But apparently pretty forgettable for me. So, yeah, probably 3.5 stars because it really did what it was supposed to do and did it well. I really enjoyed it while I was listening to it. I was kind of into the story. I didn't want to put it down while I was listening to it. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And last but certainly not least, I needed to get an acceptable in History of Magic, and for that, the acceptable prompt is just to read a fantasy. And I decided to do the Fairy Loot that I got in the month of July, and that is Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. So this book follows Myung and Jihoon, and it takes place in Seoul, South Korea. And Myung is half human, half gumiho. And gumihos are nine-tailed foxes that feed off of the life force of men, and in that process kill them. And she's trying to balance these two identities, and a compromise that she's come up with is that she still feeds off of the life force of men, but she only feeds off of the force of bad men who hurt people, and especially ones that hurt women and children. And so, but one day, Jihoon is attacked by a mythical creature in the forest, and she rescues him. In that process, she loses the bead that is within her that kind of stores this energy and allows her to stay healthy and alive. And she loses that bead, and she has a certain amount of time to get it back inside her before she dies. And so in the process of her trying to get that bead back inside of her, there's a lot going on with her family and with Jihoon's family, and they end up falling for each other, but things are very complicated, and there are different dynamics and different things going on. And ultimately, she needs to figure out who to trust, and she needs to figure out why certain things are happening. And things just get very complicated as she's trying to survive, but also trying to help make sure that Jihoon survives as well. And I actually had heard pretty polarizing things about this book. It seemed like a lot of people either loved it or really didn't like it. And I was kind of in the middle. I definitely really appreciated the world. I thought this was a really fun world. So it was a mix. So it's set in Seoul, South Korea, as I said. So it definitely feels like an urban fantasy. But there also was just, I loved the way that mythology was integrated into the story, not only just in terms of the characters and the characters' identity and how they behave, but Kat Cho also integrates different stories, little different snippets of stories in this along the way that provide different context for the characters and their backstories, and about Gumihos and about the different mythical creatures that exist in this world and how they relate to each other, which I thought was really fun. But I I also kind of wanted more from the characters, though. I felt like at times the characters were definitely felt like a lot more depth could have been added to the characters at certain times. And I haven't seen too many K-dramas, so that was kind of difficult for me to do. But they said that they kind of enjoyed it and enjoyed those elements of the story that reminded them of K-dramas. So the story is very dramatic. It's kind of insta-lovey, and character traits are kind of drawn out to their extreme. But those traits are kind of really the only thing that she focuses on with these characters, and so they don't really feel like well-rounded characters. I overall did just kind of enjoy the whimsy of this story, and it was still enjoyable to read, and so I'd probably give it a 3.5 stars. I still will actually probably continue on with this series, I think, and kind of see how her writing style develops in the next book. I think I'm intrigued enough to do that. Because this was just an enjoyable experience, even though there were some elements in here that at least didn't work for me as well as they did for some people, and kind of would put me off more if it wasn't surrounded by a bunch of whimsy and really cool other elements. And that's everything. I don't know how I read that much in the month of August, but I hope I can keep that up in September. And how did you do on your NEWTs? Did you accomplish what you wanted to read? What career did you accomplish? Let me know in the comments below. I'll also be sure to link my Instagram and Twitter. That's where I like to hang out. I'll also link my climate channel. As I said in the last one, I'm still building this out, so there will be new content on that soon, but I'm linking that below as well. And yeah, that's it for this one. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.